Answered in kind. 11. Inspired by and dedicated to Pastor Mark Driscoll. There is a peculiar irony in the charge that empathy can be toxic when it exceeds the bounds of obedience. The accusation itself reveals more than it intends. Empathy, by definition, is the capacity to enter another's interiority without conquest, to perceive without possession, to understand without annexation. Toxicity, by contrast, is not an excess of care, but a deficit of integration. To conflate the two is not merely a semantic error. It is a psychological tell, an epistemic slippage that exposes a deeper discomfort with relational mutuality. When motherhood is framed not as a vocation of nurture, but as a proprietary mandate, one that must be biologically instantiated, lest it misfire into compassion for the wrong objects, the problem is no longer theological, it is anthropological. It presupposes that care must be owned, directed, authorized, that if a woman does not submit her generative impulse to a sanctioned hierarchy, that impulse will wander dangerously, attaching itself to animals, strangers, enemies, abstractions, as though care itself were a volatile substance, safe only when sealed inside prescribed roles. Yet, compassion does not wander, it expands. The anxiety beneath such rhetoric is not concern for women, nor even for social cohesion. It is the unease that arises when relational power is no longer guaranteed by asymmetry, when care is no longer dependent on permission, when authority is no longer underwritten by gendered inevitability. The specter being named is not toxic empathy, but ungovernable moral agency. One hears, threaded through these proclamations, an old refrain dressed in modern provocation. Men are meant to lead, women are meant to follow, and yet, almost immediately, the statement collapses under the weight of its own contradictions. For if men are natural leaders, why the incessant need to police women's clothing, speech, ambition, presence? Why the obsession with temptation, distraction, derailment? A confident leader does not require the world to contort itself to preserve his self-control. A disciplined will does not externalize its failures. To insist that a woman's attire constitutes a moral threat is to confess an inability or an unwillingness to govern one's own interior life. It is to reassign responsibility downward, outward, anywhere but inward, and then to call that reassignment order. But what is leadership without responsibility? What is authority without self-mastery? What is masculinity if it must be protected from the mere visibility of women? The spectacle of moral outrage, so often performed as righteous zeal, frequently conceals a more prosaic truth. Immaturity armored as doctrine. There is a reason childishness and authoritarianism so often travel together. Both recoil from ambiguity. Both demand simplicity enforced by power. Both mistake domination for coherence. The tragedy is not that men are being criticized. The tragedy is that masculinity has been so poorly catechized that many have inherited a caricature in place of a vocation. Strength without restraint, leadership without listening, authority without accountability, passion without wisdom. This is not masculinity elevated, it is masculinity malnourished. And so it lashes out. Projection, in psychological terms, is the displacement of one's own disowned impulses onto an external object. In spiritual terms, it is the refusal to carry one's own shadow into the light. When fear, desire, or vulnerability cannot be acknowledged internally, they are condemned externally. What cannot be integrated must be attacked. What cannot be named must be demonized. Thus, women become the repository for male unrest. Their bodies become battlegrounds for unresolved desire. Their autonomy becomes an affront. Their compassion becomes suspect. Their freedom becomes rebellion, and all of it is framed with astonishing confidence as divine mandate. But God does not compete with human freedom. God is not threatened by it. The God invoked to justify domination is rarely the God who breathes, rarely the God who animates, rarely the God who sustains being itself. Instead, what is invoked is a deity of control, an idol carved from fear, enthroned atop certainty, and defended with volume. This God demands compliance because he cannot tolerate intimacy. He demands submission because he does not trust transformation. Yet, the God who says, "I am," is not issuing a hierarchy. He is disclosing being. The declaration is not positional, but ontological. It does not mean I am above you. It means I am that which is. And if that is so, if being itself is grounded in divine presence, then no human is ever outside that presence. No woman, no man, no dissenter, no enemy, no one. To speak the words, "I am," is to echo a sacred truth, whether one recognizes it or not. We do it constantly. I am right. I am afraid. I am strong. I am threatened. I am righteous. I am angry. And every such utterance is a choice, either to align with love or to fracture from it. For free will is not the freedom to do whatever one wishes. It is the freedom to turn toward or away from love. Many choose the shadows, not because the light is unavailable, but because the light is exacting. It exposes, it reveals, it dissolves the stories we use to protect ourselves from responsibility. It dismantles the elaborate architectures of blame. And so some bow instead to the silhouettes cast by fear, mistaking darkness for depth, volume for truth, aggression for clarity. But peace that must be defended with clenched teeth is not peace. Faith that requires the silencing of others is not faith. Authority that cannot withstand conversation is not authority, and leadership that collapses in the presence of women's agency was never leadership at all. A closed hand cannot receive, A clenched fist cannot heal. These are not metaphors, they are descriptions of spiritual physiology. One cannot grasp and be filled at the same time. One cannot dominate and commune simultaneously. One cannot hoard certainty and encounter truth. And so there comes a moment, a quiet, untheatrical moment, when one must decide whether to remain in argument or enter relationship, whether to shout past another or to stand present with them, whether to dismantle beliefs as an act of conquest or to listen as an act of courage, whether to see only flesh or to glimpse the divine pulse beneath it. The Christ who said to shake the dust from one's feet was not endorsing contempt. He was prescribing detachment. Leave them in peace, not because they are correct, but because coercion cannot convert. Truth does not require enforcement. Love does not need a megaphone. The eyes through which you see God are the eyes through which God sees you. That is not sentiment. It is mystical precision. It means that contempt distorts perception, that reverence clarifies it, and that the posture you adopt toward another determines the quality of reality you inhabit. So yes, bless them, not as a dismissal, but as a release. Bless them into the consequences of their own hands, not as punishment, but as education. For every prison is first constructed internally, and every liberation begins with the willingness to turn toward the light one has been avoiding. The dim corridors of ignorance cannot withstand the illumination of the limitless light of God, which is love. Not because love is loud, but because it is true. And truth does not argue, it reveals. It does not coerce, it invites. It does not dominate, it integrates. Pastor, would you pass the compassion? For in the end, what is offered here is not condemnation but clarity, not vengeance but vision, not superiority but solidarity in the slow, exacting work of becoming whole, an offering given freely, firmly, and without fear. For there is only God in action. God bless your divine presence. I send you all the divine love of my being to bless and prosper you. May you get what is coming to you by your own hand, so you may be freed from the prison you have trapped yourself in, as we all do. For where you focus, there you are. And where we focus, we will always be answered in kind.